There you go.
Traveling is his profession. Bradley Mayhew writes tourist guides, mostly about Asia. This time, he is working on a very special project, an adventure, an experiment. He retravels a route taken by a merchant from Venice more than 750 years ago. He is happy with any transport he can get. Always east, along the Great Silk Road. Through remote mountain ranges, inhospitable deserts and ancient cities, Bradley Mayhew follows the route of Marco Polo. From Venice to Beijing, through countries such as Iran and Afghanistan, 10,000 kilometers overland, a journey as great an adventure today as in Marco Polo's time. Not the worst time of year to make a trip to Venice.
Carnival is when Venetians really let their hair down. The costumes and the masks are so colourful, they give you a real exotic feel of what the city was like in its heyday, when the Silk Road trade connected Venice to China, and this was the place to be in the world. It's also a great place for taking photos.
From here, in 1271, a young son of a merchant embarked on a journey that would eventually pass into legend. Bradley is looking for traces of the golden age of Venice, when families like the Polos traded in silk, spices, and precious stones, which were transported by caravans along the Silk Road. It was this long-distance trade that made Venice's fortunes. Luca Zentellini, publisher and antiquarian, collects original sources about the 13th century, the time of Marco Polo.
All over the Mediterranean, all over from Constantinople, from Echo, from Laius.
Yes, well, Constantinople and Venice was the biggest market of the time. Venice became the biggest empire of the medieval age.
Right.
It's incredibly, because this small town became something with few people.
Nice.
Medieval Venice is well documented, but not much is known about Marco Polo. Preserved for posterity is his book, The Description of His Travels. It exists in more than 100 versions. Some of them are richly adorned, while from others only fragments exist.
Take this book and have it read, and here you will find all the greatest marvels and the great diversities. That's nice. It's really amazing, you know, how young Marco Polo was when he set off. He was only about 17 years old, almost the same age as when people leave school these days. You know, so he came back and wrote this incredible book with all this geographical knowledge that inspired everyone from, you know, Columbus took a copy of Marco Polo's travels with him when he was headed to the west. So it's an amazing impact this one man has had.
I'm sure this is a book you would like to read.
And then the antiquarian comes up with something quite special.
This is the Yule version. Yeah, I've been trying to find this for the longest time.
An annotated edition of the Travels of Marco Polo by Henry Yule,
That's fantastic.
dating from the year 1871.
That's great. Thank you very much, Luca. I'll be reading this along the Silk Road.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I first read Marco Polo's book when I was studying at university. And it really epitomized the dream of traveling through Asia at that time. It had all the wonders of the region, had all the romance and the color of the Silk Road. So yeah, it really spurred me to want to go and see, what is it like? What's Asia like these days? I've been to a few countries on the road, but doing them all together in one long trip, that's what's exciting. You see the gradual change of cultures and countries from the Turkic world to the Persian world to the Chinese world, and that's going to be really exciting.
It must be somewhere here in the quarter of San Giovanni Crisostomo. The gondolieri know the site where the house of Marco Polo once stood. As a child, he must have played at the side of this canal. His father, Niccolo Polo, was constantly traveling abroad. He was one of the first Europeans to reach as far as distant China. Now he wanted to go back, and this time his son was to accompany him. Young Marco didn't have any idea how long this adventure was to last.
So when the Polos finally returned home to this gate after being away for 27 years, they were refused entry. No one recognized them. They were probably wearing long Mongol cloaks, big heavy beards. They'd aged by almost a quarter of a century, and no one really recognized them.
At some point after his return, Marco Polo was taking part in a naval battle against rival Genoa when he was captured. It was in prison that he dictated the book that would make him famous, and which in Venice gave him a nickname, Il Milione, the Millions Man.
The Venetians called Marco Polo Il Milione because of everything was described in gigantic numbers, thousands of armies and soldiers and horses. No one really quite believed what he was talking about.
Either way, his departure from Venice is historically documented.
They're made recently, or do you also have them antique?
What would the Venetians have worn at the time? Nobody would know better than Stefano Nicolaou, Venice's most famous costume designer.
Is this something that a traveller during Marco Polo's era would have worn when he was travelling?
Sure. He started from Venice with these costumes, and they go to the China.
Bradley wants to know from which material the clothes were made at the time. From wool mainly, Stefano explains. Like this coat, for instance. More of a cape, really, and very warm. Open in the front and at the back for ease of riding.
And on his legs, what would he have worn underneath them?
Oh, for the leg, they use like stockings.
Okay, right.
Complete, you see.
I see.
This is the...
This is like the heel.
Yes, the heel. And the lace on the belt and the fix just on the side.
Okay.
So, the summer, spring, winter, in the autumn. Maybe they have the same costumes, the same dresses, and they just put over something more or take off and rest just in shirt and, We can start from this. It's about a long shirt.
Okay.
You can put on.
Then Stefano wants to see what Bradley would look like as Marco Polo.
This is a much heavier...
Yes, and have something about this hat. Okay.
It's very comfortable. It moves and flows easily if you're moving or you're on a horse. It's lovely. So, how do I look?
Very good. You can go to the China now.
Yeah, this is great. I could travel in this. It's a little bit heavier than my Gore-Tex jacket, but still,
well, for
it's
the
pretty
long
good.
travel, it's good.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you. Let's go.
Most likely, Marco Polo left Venice in a convoy of trading and war galleys. Today, ferries cover the route across the eastern Mediterranean. Bradley writes mainly travel guidebooks for the Australian publisher Lonely Planet.
It's a very strange life. Half the year you're traveling and seeing exciting things, meeting people. It's a very intense stimulus. And then for 4 or 5 months of the year. You're at the computer 15 hours a day. You don't leave the house. You don't see anyone. You lose your suntan. You come out of the house blinking into the sunlight like a little mole. You know?
Bradley Mayhew, 40 years old, British, married and living in the USA, is a professional traveller. But retracing the route of Marco Polo will not be an easy task.
There are over 100 different versions of Marco Polo's book. It would have been copied by hand at that time. So a lot of the spellings, a lot of the route information is slightly different with each version. So trying to match up the name that Marco Polo saw and the name that's the modern name on the map, that can be pretty tricky.
Acre, the ancient Ptolemies, founded 4,000 years ago, is today located in Israel. Here, the Polos stepped onto Asian soil for the first time. They came to meet the Pope's representative before continuing on with their journey. Back then, 40,000 people lived in Acre, whose centre is still the ancient Crusader castle.
When Marco arrived in Akko after his long sea voyage, the city was really the last bastion of Christendom in the Holy Land. The Crusaders had lost Jerusalem and they were planning to try and retake it. So you can imagine that this citadel would have been full of thousands of knights dressed in their suits of armour, with soldiers, monks, pilgrims, visiting royalty, and traders from Pisa, Amalfi, Venice. It would have been a very busy driving place.
And a place under imminent threat. The secret escape routes are still in place. For more than 100 years, Acre had been the capital of the Christian kingdom in the Holy Land, but the Crusaders were not able to hold the fortified city. It fell in 1291.
So by the time Marco got here, Akko had changed from being the gateway to the Holy Land to being the last bastion of Christianity here. Within 20 years of his arrival, the Mamluk armies were here at the gates. They were outnumbered 100 to 1, and after a 2-month-long siege, it was all over for the Crusaders.
Acre today is a sleepy port town in the north of Israel, close to the border with Lebanon. Bradley is looking for a place to stay. Walid Hachalil has got a vacant room for him.
Okay, great. One question.
Yes,
I'm trying to find some places that have some connection to Marco Polo when he was here.
There are Marco Polo Road Street.
Marco Polo Street?
Yes.
Do you have time to show me that later on?
Yes.
Walid grew up in Acre, a city strongly shaped by the close proximity of different religions. The line between peaceful coexistence and conflict is a fine one here. In the old quarter of town live mostly Arabs, Muslims with an Israeli passport, but not many civil rights. Israeli soldiers are a common sight in the souk.
When we've been reading a lot about Marco Polo, we've been reading about the 13th century. And it seems to me that there was much the same situation then. There were holy wars going on, there was fighting, battle over the Holy Land. It's almost the same now, 2,000 years later.
If we go back a few thousand, you can see all the people in the world try to come to fight and to occupy in this area. Why? I don't know. Maybe because they are Holy Land. Right. This is all.
The soldiers are training to be frontline reporters. In the souk, they are practicing to take pictures and videos, they tell Bradley.
I'm a photographer also.
They are taking mostly photos, with some video. The army has provided them with simple cameras.
Exactly. We have this.
Good enough for training, reckons Bradley.
Exactly.
Acre is not a political flashpoint, but for the people who live here, the Middle East conflict is part of daily life.
So you're saying that it's like fighting between two brothers?
Of course, they are two brothers fight for one home, but they have to come to the end. They have to sit in the tables. This is your piece of land. This is your piece of land. Sit quiet, and that's all. If they make a peace and they open the border from Russia and Ukraine, in half an hour from Akko to Lebanon, half an hour to the first city, Tur, where my sister lives.
You miss your sister? You haven't seen her for so long?
I don't see her since 82, 83.
I'm sorry to hear that.
This kind of life. Her father died in 88, my father did me. And she couldn't come to visit also. This kind of life, my friend.
Today, modern trains run along the Mediterranean coast of Israel. The Polos must have traveled here too, though in less comfort. On his first journey, Marco Polo's father, Niccolo Polo, had received a special request from the Chinese emperor.
From here, the Polos made a quick detour to Jerusalem to run an errand for the Great Khan, pick up some oil from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that's where we're headed now.
The Holy City, bone of contention between religions since time immemorial. At close quarters lie Christian churches, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the most sacred place of Judaism, the Wailing Wall. The Jewish quarter adjoins the Muslim quarter. Muslims consider Jerusalem to be Islam's third holiest city, after Mecca and Medina. Last but not least, Jerusalem is the place where Jesus Christ was crucified and buried. On this exact spot stands the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Catholics, Protestants, Copts, followers of the Orthodox churches, to all of them this church is sacred. In these lamps burns holy oil, symbol of divine mercy.
These lamps contain exactly the kind of oil that the Polos came to pick up for Kublai Khan.
It sanctifies from sins. It brings healing to the sick. The oil is believed to be holy.
We're not quite sure why, but the Polos must have told the Khan about the oil, and the oil became a symbol of the Christian faith. The Kublai Khan was interested in hearing about all the religions from the world, so it became a symbol for the Polos to bring back some information for the Khan on Christianity.
From Jerusalem, the Polos most likely continued their journey by boat towards Turkey. Today, that's impossible. Bradley has to come up with a different route. The conflict between Israel and its Arab neighbors makes traveling in this region tricky.
A lot of the borders are closed. North into Syria is closed. South to the Gaza Strip is sealed. And then with the security checks and the visa and the Israeli visa stamp issue in your passport, you've got to always keep your eye open. You've got to plan your route and know where you're going in this part of the world.
Highway number 1 in Syria. Bradley wants to travel to China overland, like Marco Polo did in his day. There are no camel caravans anymore, but there are plenty of clapped-out buses. They are cheap and noisy, but you do get to know your fellow passengers. A sponge trader, for example. He should buy a sponge for his wife. Bradley does not speak Arabic, but this much he gets. A friend of Bradley has put him in touch with a young man in Syria who will be his travel companion. Mohammed Sheikh, nicknamed Santiago, studies English literature. He comes from Aleppo.
Well, in a place like Syria, where I don't speak the language, I can't read Arabic script. Everything is 10 times more difficult. I was lucky to get on a bus going the right direction, but luckily I've met up with Santiago now, so he's making sure I get to Aleppo in one piece. Hopefully, at least, inshallah. Is it far to Aleppo?
No, it's not far. Less than like almost 1 hour or a bit more. It's not that far.
The two are heading to one of the most ancient cities in the world, a legendary trading center, today the largest city in Syria. In the heart of the old town towers the citadel. Assyrians, Persians, Greek, later Rome and Byzantium, whoever ruled in Aleppo ruled from here. Many have left their mark on the fortified hill. The Islamic sections of the citadel date from Ottoman times. Today, the fort towers above a metropolis of 2 million inhabitants. Around 6,000 shops line up along 12 kilometers of roofed alleyways. The Bazaar of Aleppo is the longest covered bazaar in the world.
See here, like always different.
The cloth market is of particular interest to Bradley.
He's not allowed to buy, like to have the same product. So they sell different stuffs. And
Many of the fabrics come from China, mostly cheap synthetic goods, as Santiago explains.
Silk comes from China.
yeah.
But if you came here 2,000 years ago, you'd find fabrics from China back then. I mean, in some ways, you know, the design is different, but in some ways things haven't really changed.
Yes.
Very beautiful.
Does it come with the color of your beard?
No, I don't think it's quite me, but thank you very much. So this is where people come to get their everyday goods.
Yeah,
It's a-
everyday stuff like what they need to eat, to wear, to like to use at home for cleaning stuffs.
And then you get traditional goods like the soap right next to the modern goods. You get everything
Yeah,
in
you
one
see
place.
the big like comparison, like contrast between these two stuffs.
This is not a place that Marco Polo came to necessarily, but this carries the flavor of what the Silk Road would have been about. But also the Silk Road smell, everything from the soap to the spices. This place is really alive and vibrant. It's great. This is one of the best souks I've ever been to. If you come to the Middle East, this is the place to come to.
Good for hair, good for body, for face, for everything. 8 years old, 8 star, better quality.
The secret of Aleppo soap lies in using the correct ratio of olive and laurel oil. Even today, it is still manufactured in the bazaar. The oils are mixed, the soap is boiled and cut when it has solidified.
Faster, faster!
Besides soap, Aleppo is well known for another luxury product, which is also produced directly in the bazaar by Mr. Marva Sally Rumia.
اشتغل بايده هلا بنعلمه شلون طريقه وبيشتغل بايده والبنات اشتغلوا بقى هو
He said you can't do it. Girls already did it, so you are a man. So you should do it.
That sounds like a challenge to me.
Yeah, I think so. صار تحدي on it.
I don't know much about silk itself. My wife will be the one to ask about silk, but I'm interested in how silk has become a symbol for the trade on the Silk Road. The history side of it is interesting. The actual making it like this, I know absolutely nothing about, but I'm learning very fast. Yeah, silk has been essential to the history of this part of the world for the last 2,000 years or so. All the way coming from China, it's really one of the main reasons that this international trade started anyway. The Romans really was the heyday of the old Silk Road. The silk came from China and it became so popular in Rome that it was slowly bankrupting the entire empire. They thought it grew on trees like cotton or something. They didn't have a clue, and the Chinese didn't want to tell them. That was a secret they wanted to definitely keep hold of. A trade secret 2,000 years ago. And you can still find it 2,000 years later. I don't think workshops like this have really changed that much since then.
Bradley wants to keep moving. A brief farewell where the overland taxis leave for the border. A short drive through the foothills of the Amanos Mountains, then a final road sign. In Turkey, the local buses are called dolmuş. They go to every corner of the country, including the place where Bradley is meeting a friend of a friend.
Must be Bradley.
Yeah, Yusuf?
Yes, that's right. I was looking forward to see you.
It's nice to meet you, yeah?
Yusuf Sevinçli is a photographer. He lives and works in Istanbul and, like Bradley, he loves to travel. When Marco Polo was here, the place was known as Laias. Today, it's called Yumurtalik and is a quiet town of 5,000 inhabitants. Yusuf and Bradley have found a boat to take them to a tiny island bearing the name of Marco Polo. Coming from Jerusalem, the Venetian traveler landed right here in Laias. At that time, Laias was the main port of a Christian enclave surrounded by Muslim Seljuks. The ruins might have been customs buildings, but no one knows exactly. What is certain is that at the time of Marco Polo, this was the westernmost terminus of the Silk Road. Marco Polo writes,
And the merchants of Venice and Genoa and other countries come here to sell their goods and to buy what they lack. And whatsoever persons would travel to the interior of the East, merchants or others, they take their way by this city of Laias.
Marco Polo spent several months here, most likely preparing for the next leg of his journey. It's not entirely clear which exact route Marco Polo took. Bradley and Yusuf thoroughly pore over the maps. From Laias, there are several possible routes leading to the northeast of Turkey.
So part of the problem that we have is that some of the places that Marco Polo mentions we can pinpoint. He mentions, for example, like Caesarea or Kayseri. He mentions Sebaste, which is the old name
Must be
for
Sivas.
Sivas, yep. And he also mentions Azinga, which must be Erzincan. But some of the names, they just don't exist anymore, so it's really hard trying to match them up.
We can also take the shortest route through here.
I think Marco Polo would have followed the valleys, you know, it makes sense to follow the Euphrates, so maybe we'll try and find a route that connects up through there, up to Erzincan.
It is 800 kilometers to the upper Euphrates. Luxury long-distance coaches are few and far between where the highway ends and the mountains begin. Yusuf and Bradley don't care. They'll take anything they can get if it brings them further east, further along the so-called Silk Road.
The Silk Road is very much a misnomer. You know, there's not one road. there's a whole network and a whole thread of different routes that go all the way across Asia. So they would choose whichever route was the best suited for that time, for the weather, for the season, for bandits, robbers, you know. So it's not quite as simple as it sounds.
Bradley also has to adapt his routing to the region's political crises. He has to abandon his plan of traveling via Mosul in Iraq, too dangerous. So he chooses a route through eastern Turkey.
Working as a guidebook writer is a great job. I can't complain about it. It's a real addiction that gets under the skin, and I think I could never stop doing this now. Even if I wasn't working, I'd still have to travel. It's part of who I am, really.
The road winds down through the mountains. In a side valley of the Euphrates, in the quiet of the countryside, lies an ancient town. In 1228, a local emir started construction on the Great Mosque of Divri. It's not the size that makes this mosque so impressive. The fascination lies rather in the details. Abstract and floral ornaments adorn the portals, delicately carved into stone with the utmost accuracy.
You can tell that Divri is, at the moment, in the middle of nowhere, but it must have been at some point right on the heart of an important trade route. You're right on the Euphrates River, and you can tell from this incredible building there must have been some serious money coming through here at some time to be able to afford this and to be able to mix all these different styles.
I think this great mosque is more than something, more than a pure Turkish Islamic architecture. It's a great combination, mixture of many different cultures like Turkish, Islamic, Persian, and Mesopotamian cultures. All of them are combined in one building, and that's amazing.
This mosque was built in around 1220, and Marco Polo must have come around here around 50 years later. So although he doesn't actually specifically mention this mosque, it doesn't mean that he didn't pass through here. There's a lot of things that Marco Polo didn't quite bother to get around to mention. So he would have come somewhere through here, would have come up through this high plateau, would have come through here, probably up the Euphrates River, and then carried on to Erzincan, Erzurum, and headed east.
The next morning, rush hour at Divri train station.
The train is at 5:15. Mr. Aziz, you must meet. He is the driver and he must know what time
The driver of the train?
Yes.
Okay. Salam alaikum. Hello, sir. Merhaba.
It takes 4 hours from here to the city of Erzincan, Marco Polo's Azinga. Even though the train stops every 5 minutes, it doesn't get really crowded. It's easy to strike up a conversation with your fellow travelers, especially if you have some bread, tomatoes, and cheese to share. Adam Kizilgos studies economics in Istanbul, it turns out. His hometown is Erzincan, and he returns home whenever he can find the time.
Is that where he's from?
He's going to visit his parents, but also they are going to play Cirit. It's a kind of old traditional game that you play on riding horses.
Can we go and see that? Is that possible?
Senle gelebilir miyiz diyor.
Tabii ki.
Of course.
Marco Polo's Azinga. Today, a city of 100,000 people in northeastern Turkey. In Erzincan's Cirit Club, the team is meeting. Adam still feels the effects of the long journey. Cirit is a game played on horseback. It dates back to the time of the Ottoman sultans, maybe even to when the Mongols passed through the region. Over the last few years, Cirit has been staging a comeback, especially amongst young people like Adam.
Küçük yaşlarda bilmeye başladım. Tabii babam yapıyordu bu sporu. Ben de zaten küçüklüğümüzden beri atımız vardı. Ben de ondan gördüm. O şekilde başladım. Devam ediyorum. Çok da memnunum.
Today, more than 20 club members aged between 12 and 62 are once again playing Cirit in Erzincan. The name Cirit comes from the red javelins used in the game.
Yeah, I've ridden once before in Mongolia, but the horse was about that tall, so this is a slightly different kettle of fish. Adam, where's the brake?
Break is here.
This is the brake?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all my tuition, is it? That's all I get?
Yeah. You can go now.
Okay. All right.
It takes half an hour by horse to get to the playing field. It lies in the center of a rather faceless industrial city that has been devastated by more earthquakes than any other city in Turkey.
Traffic's getting a little bit dense now, so I'm going to leave it to the professionals.
Traditionally, the game is accompanied by Şenay pipes and drums. Yusuf receives a rundown of the rules.
Buradan çıkan karşıya gelip ciridini atıyor. Öbür arkadaşı bunun peşine gelip burada atarsa atmışsa gelip bu sahaya atıp dönüyor. Vurursa puan alıyor. Vuramazsa bir şey yok.
7 referees make sure that Cirit is played according to the rules.
And you have to hit the body.
They have to hit the body, not the legs, not the horses.
It's like ritualized warfare, you know. It's like practice for the big battle.
Obviously, it's a war game.
Marco Polo's itinerary is not always easy to pinpoint. But here, in the northeast of modern-day Turkey, is one place he definitely traveled, together with his father and uncle. In deepest winter.
Snow in Erzurum certainly lives up to its reputation.
Marco Polo describes the area as the coldest place he experienced on his entire voyage. Apart from the cold, the Venetian quite liked the city, describing it as noble and rich. Despite its out-of-the-way location, Erzurum prospers even today, and the jewelers who are based in this former caravanserai are making good money, especially with one particular stone known as black stone.
More simple ones.
Marco Polo was particularly interested in precious stones, in anything, in fact, that was valuable and easy to transport.
33 stones.
The whole Polo family were jewel traders for a lot of their business, and part of his book was really a book for traveling merchants. So he's always describing jewels, local mines, lapis lazuli, pearls from India. It's always in the back of his mind. He's always got an eye open for these kind of things. You just can't turn it off. It's part of who he is.
Jeweler Ali Celebi tells them the name of the black stone, Altu Taş.
Oltu taşı şimdi değil mi?
Evet.
Yes. That's it.
I know that the Taş means stone, like Tashkent, the city, but what's the Altu?
Oltu ne demek diyor? Tamam, Oltu.
Yusuf learns that Altu is actually a town not far from Erzurum, and that the stone is mined there.
Nasıl bir taş bu?
And this is what it looks like when it comes out of the mountain. It is dug out by hand, 300 meters underground.
Deep, and all labor work
By
hand.
First used in the Bronze Age, later used by the Romans. It seems like it reached its heyday in my own country during the reign of Queen Victoria, when she wore it after the death of Prince Albert. I didn't know that. That's the history of Altu Taşı. We just have to find out where it's mined now.
Tamam. Çok sağ olun, iyi günler. Sağ olun. Sağ olun. Bye bye. So we got the car, man. Great.
Is it a good one?
Not a brand new one, but still, it's drivable.
Traveling in Turkey, you must carry that kind of thing under your hand. You never know.
You should have told me that before we set off. How far are we from Altu?
The area is pretty remote. Hopefully this is the right turn.
Should we pick up?
Yeah, let's get this guy right.
Selamünaleyküm amca. Nasılsın amca?
Teşekkür ederim. Siz nasılsınız?
Sağ olasın. Amca bu Günlüce köyü varmış.
Evet.
Biz oraya gidecektik
Burası.
de. Burası mı?
Burası.
Bize yolu gösterebilecek misin amca?
Evet, gösteririm.
Hadi gel bin arabaya.
Like everybody else in the village, Nazim Elibal is a farmer, and like most people here, he works the Altu mines. It takes 3 hours to reach the mine. Nazim climbs up every day, except when the snow is too deep. A few villagers are working a mine together, Bradley discovers.
Yusuf, I think these are my size.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's unisex, you know.
Ama kılıca gider orada madeni göster. Tamam.
Yine ormanın tercih
Almanya'da giymiş miydin böyle bir şey? Eski patronum bir giy.
This particular tunnel is 180 meters long and not particularly safe. And so tight that one must crawl on all fours.
We're about 100 meters into the mountain, and we still have more to go. It's small, dusty, and claustrophobic, and I'm trying not to freak out too badly.
Altutash, sometimes incorrectly called black amber, is the petrified root of a tree.
So you find a vein of Olutashi, and then you have to knock all the way around it very carefully so that you can get the whole kind of the old former tree root and get it out in one piece.
Nazim has been working the mines since he was 12. He can almost smell the Altutash hidden in the rock.
Oltutashi. So this is the Oltutashi. It comes out in veins. This stuff is already hardened. It's been in contact with the air, so it's already got quite hard. When it originally comes out of the veins, it's all soft and malleable. It's only when it gets in contact with the air that it takes on this hard format.
Safi. Safi. Oltutaşı.
Oltutaşı.
Safi yani. Çürük değil, sahte değil. Yan sanayi değil, asılı.
Okay.
The Altutash is processed right in the village. When first polished, it turns brown. Bringing out the brilliant black gloss of the stone takes time and experience.
Well, the one thing I learned was to tell a fake one from a real one. The real one burns. So if you've got some jewelry made out of this, throw it in the fire. If it burns, it's real. The story is that if you give one of these to someone who's caught your eye, that girl will be instantly attracted to you. But in my experience, that works with all kinds of jewelry. But the more expensive, the better.
Nazim Elibal has thrown a delicious slab of mutton onto the barbecue and has invited Bradley and Yusuf to spend the night in the village. Next morning, they continue their journey through eastern Anatolia, passing geese on the country roads and cars in even worse condition than theirs. Yusuf, who works as a photographer in Istanbul, has to return home for an assignment. Before he leaves, the two want to visit one last place together. Ani, the deserted and destroyed capital of Greater Armenia. Ani had once been an important trading hub on the Silk Road, home to more than 100,000 people. Three entryways lead into the cathedral, one reserved for the patriarch, one for the king, and one, the smallest, for the people. In 1045, Byzantium took over the city, followed by the Seljuks.
Ani changed hands all the time, so when the Muslims were in control, the Seljuks converted it into a mosque. When the Christians had the upper hand, they took it back to a church, and it kept going back and forth over the centuries.
The arrival of the Mongols heralded Ani's decline. An earthquake finished off the city. The Silk Road soon bypassed Ani completely.
I think Marco Polo went fairly close to here. He probably didn't go to this exact spot, but he went close to here on the way to Iran. Back in his day, I think this was Greater Armenia, which would have covered everything from what is now Armenia to eastern Turkey to Iran to Georgia. This whole area would have been Greater Armenia, and he writes a lot about that. Looking around, there's not really that much left, a few enigmatic ruins. The Seljuks took the city, the Georgians invaded, the Mongols besieged the place. But the worst thing has just been the ravages of time. Earthquakes have rocked the city, lightning has struck several of the buildings, and the city was left neglected for centuries. So it's a very enigmatic place.
It's better to have too much rather than too little petrol, especially in this remote region.
Pretty much at the end of Turkey, feels like the middle of nowhere. From pretty much here, Marco Polo talks about Georgia in this direction, Armenia over there. He talks about Iraq, Mosul and Baghdad. He also talks about these great fountains of oil. Not good for eating, but good for burning, he says. And those are probably the modern-day oil fields of Baku in Azerbaijan. Over this way, he talks about Tabriz in Iran, and that's his probable location of his trip, and that's where I'm headed next. Tabriz.
The dolmush is coming. Time to say goodbye, man.
Yeah, thanks for everything. It's been great. Good luck with the trip back and the assignment.
They have been traveling together for 4 weeks. Now it's time for Bradley to continue alone. Marco Polo believed that Noah's Ark rested on the summit. For Bradley, Mount Ararat marks his final destination in Turkey.
So this wild corner of Turkey, underneath Mount Ararat, this is a fitting place to end the first leg of this trip. Up next is Big Bad Iran, which I am personally really looking forward to.
Getting hold of a visa has been far from easy. This is a country with, shall we say, a dubious reputation.
On a train, headed for Tabriz. It's good to be here at last.
Bradley Mayhew has been on the road for almost 2 months by now. From Venice, he has traveled through Israel and Syria to Turkey. Now he has reached the 5th country on his route.
Very plush. Tea, coffee, free newspaper. What more could you want? Welcome to Iran. Oh, Big Bad Iran, the land of the Ayatollahs. It's got such a terrible reputation that for me that just makes it even more interesting. I just can't believe that the country is as bad as all the images I see on the TV. So for me, it's an extra thrill to have a look at what the country's really like. Just try and get beyond the headlines. And the one thing I've found in my travels is the worse the government, often the nicer the people. So I'm looking forward to getting underneath the skin a little bit.
It hasn't been easy to find a travel companion in Iran, but a friend has helped Bradley with an email address, and now he is here. Arash Saitodi, a young lawyer from Tehran.
You're welcome. Shall we take a cab and go to hotel? Perfect.
Arabs, Turks, Persian Safavids and Russians have ruled over this magnificent trade center located in the west of present-day Iran. Today, 1.5 million people live in Tabriz.
You can see Tabriz is a modern, bustling city, like could be any other city in the Middle East. But then slowly you see the women are all dressed in black, they're all wearing the hijab, some of them wearing the chador. Then you start to pick out all the details and the color, and each person has their own kind of little bit of makeup, little bit of hair coming out the front. It's a kind of your own silent stamp on the hijab. You have to adjust your eyes.
When Marco Polo reached the Persian Empire, he must have seen buildings like this one, monumental in scale, sophisticated in detail. The Blue Mosque of Tabriz. It took 33 years to cover the building in blue glazed ceramics.
The colors, the calligraphy, this the whole kind of sense of grandeur that these buildings are supposed to inspire. This is your insignificance, under Islam. This is exactly what this is meant to do. And the real genius is the dome, because you can imagine in a land here with no wood, how do you create these huge, gigantic buildings? The dome is the answer. For Marco Polo, you can imagine him coming here in the 13th century. These buildings were the skyscrapers of the age. These were epic, sun-baked brick. I mean, this didn't get any more impressive than this. He must have been totally blown away by this kind of architecture on this kind of scale.
The Tabriz Bazaar had been one of the most important hubs along the Silk Road. Goods from China or India were collected here before they were traded on to Europe. For a millennium, carpets have been the most important commodity here, brought from across Persia. Carpet traders are not simply traders. They oversee the entire process of carpet production. Only they can afford the significant investment. A carpet like this from Tabriz, with its typical central rosette, can easily cost up to €10,000 wholesale.
This is my favorite one so far. I'm not sure it's quite going to fit in my backpack, but I'm going to try. If only I had a horse or a camel, this would be the one to take.
At the crossroads of the bazaar, traders are relaxing in the middle of the hustle and bustle with a glass of tea. Bradley studies The Wonders of the World, the book of Marco Polo, which during his time, the late 13th century, caused a huge stir in Europe.
Tabriz is a great and noble city. Men of Tabriz get their living by trade and handicrafts, weaving many kinds of beautiful and valuable stuffs of silk and gold. Their merchants make large profits. Here in the carpet bazaar of Tabriz, you can see that nothing much has really changed. The big profits are still here as they were back then.
7,000 shops spread over 7 square kilometers, 24 caravanserais, and as many timche, canopied market halls, make Tabriz one of the largest covered bazaars in the world. In one of the eldest timche, second-hand carpets are for sale.
It's really a rich series of designs. You've got like a tree of life design.
It holds always the symbols of Persian gardens. You can find many different types of flowers and tree leaves. It was the most important part of our furniture.
Yeah.
We
sleep
on it,
well.
we live in it, we drink in it, we eat in it, and at last we die on it.
Well, these are all woolen carpets, I think, so we're going to try and track down some silk. There's got to be some silk on the Silk Road somewhere, so we're going to do some more detective work and find some.
The Tabriz Bazaar is not only the largest commercial center for Persian carpets. New carpets are designed here as well. Antique ones are restored. And also the yarn from which the carpets are made is dyed right here in the bazaar. Mohammed Sabanchi dyes wool or silk, depending on his customers' orders. Bradley is in luck. A trader has just brought in some raw silk. Natural dyes are still used for carpets of the highest quality. The dyes are for sale in the bazaar as well.
That's the great thing, is that they're not selling just new plastic goods made from China. A lot of these goods are made in these back alleys and just behind the facade that you see. So it's all still going on in the background. It's really nice to see this. definitely a Silk Road feel here, just from the bazaars that have been here for centuries. And you can kind of feel that through the carpets as well. This has been a carpet centre for, 1,000 years or so. And you get carpets here from all over Asia, from Azerbaijan, from Turkey, from Turkmen carpets, from Bukhara, Pakistan, Afghanistan. They all come in here to Tabriz, and it's like a mini Silk Road of its own. How is it? Good?
And where does the silk come from? Arash and Bradley hear that there is a village not far from Tabriz called Hanimu, in which silk is spun.
30 to 40 kilometers far from Tabriz.
The two are asking for directions to Golem Reza Fatih, who runs the village workshop. The raw silk comes from other regions of Iran, but it is spun and processed here. 200 families in the village make their living from knotting carpets. 120 to 140 knots per square centimetre are required to make a carpet of the highest quality.
25,000 ties.
25,000
per day.
Between the four.
Between the four.
So it's 8,000 knots per person per day. Wow.
To this day, Persian carpets are made mainly in cottage industries like this one, Arash is told.
He's not satisfied with his job. He doesn't work to labor in such a difficult job and earn for a little money. But he has no way out. He doesn't know any other job to do.
This work is so intricate, it's amazing. I'm this far away and I still can't work out how it's done. The amount of knots you have to pay to earn your money, it's this is not an easy job.
Some 400 kilometers east, Bradley follows a path that leads him into Iran's highest mountain range. He is on the trail of the assassins.
We've still got about 70 kilometers of roads to go up in the mountains. Back in Marco Polo's day, this is the center of a violent, enigmatic sect. We're going to check it out.
Marco Polo describes some of the places he visits in just a few lines, but he devotes 3 long chapters of his book to these mountains and to the assassins, the Al-Qaeda of his time.
I think he was recounting one of the major stories of the day. This was something he'd heard all along the Silk Road. It'd been kind of whispered down the stages, and he'd heard this story, and this was the big news of the time. It's got everything. It's got murders, assassinations, it's got castles up in the mountains, it's got images of paradise, it's even got racy references to women. So it's a very exotic story he was recounting back to his readers back in Europe.
Deep in the Elborz mountain range lay the headquarters of the assassins, hidden away on an impregnable rock.
This is where Hassan al-Sabah created this earthly paradise. He would drug up these young warriors with hashish, he says, hashishin, the assassins. He would then drop them in this beautiful garden, these streams of honey and milk, beautiful flowers everywhere. And according to Marco Polo, these young women, experts in the arts of love. It's a very kind of salacious little comment. And then the old man would take them out the garden, bring them back here and say, I can take you back to paradise. I have this power anytime I want. And now if you do my bidding, I can bring you back here.
Killings, assassinations, and suicide missions were the hallmarks of the so-called assassins, who can be considered the first suicide bombers in history. Viziers, princes, the Caliph of Egypt, famous statesmen of their time, all fell victim. The remnants of their fortresses are all that remain.
Sending out these young men on religious or politically motivated assassinations, fueling these guys with the idea of martyrdom and paradise. I mean, for me, if you then add some words like Al-Qaeda or suicide bombers, there is a parallel to the modern world. Not here, not Iran. I'm not talking about the Iranian regime here at all in any way, but on a more general level, there does seem to be some parallels. There does seem to be even some inspiration.
For 3 decades, Iran has been an Islamic republic, a theocracy in which all power lies in the hands of the religious leaders. Staying with Arash saves Bradley the cost of an hotel, which is fine with him. No one becomes a guidebook writer to get rich.
Hi, it's Bradley. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Everything's good. I'm still alive. I'm in Tehran. Yeah, I can't believe it either. They actually gave me a visa. Yeah, everything's going well. No problems. People are great. The only problem I have is money. So I was hoping maybe we could get that second advance paid. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, perfect. Good. Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye. So how do you know which car's a taxi? They all look the same to me.
Yeah, in Iran every car can be a cab. So
anyone?
It's supposed as a second job for most of people. When the window is a little bit open, you shout your destination to the driver. Shah Abdolazim.
The two are heading to the holy shrine of Shah Abdolazim in the south of Tehran. Arash explains that taxis in Tehran don't simply go where you want. You take them to a certain location and then take another cab.
You speak English. Where you come from?
Yeah, and you speak English too.
Yeah, a little.
I'm from England. And how's life in Tehran?
Oh, not bad.
Yeah?
Yeah, we are used to.
Do you have any modern Iranian music you can play?
Yeah, of course I have.
Yeah, that would be good.
I can play my own music from my band.
You have your own band?
Yes, I'm a musician. Can hear your band.
Ali Reza Tabatabai is a drummer in an underground band. They arrange to meet in the evening.
Ali Reza, nice to meet you. Great, thank you. Hope to see you tonight.
In the southern outskirts of Tehran lies the grave of Abdulazim, a descendant of Imam Hussein, who is held in high esteem throughout Shia Islam.
The people come to holy shrines for praying and crossing their fingers for important issues like marriage, important exams, or the issues of private life.
Only believers are allowed to visit the grave of the Imam. As a non-Muslim, Bradley has to wait outside.
There are tens of thousands of shrines or imamzadeh across Iran. This is the third or fourth most holiest shrine in the area. There is a great, wellspring of faith, and this is one place where you can go and express that. And it's a very important part of the Iranian psyche. It's very much government supported as well.
Connected to the shrine is a mosque. On Friday, the believers attend the weekly sermon, which frequently has a political agenda. But mainly, people are mourning the death of Imam Hussein, a grandson of the Prophet who was killed by Sunni assassins 1400 years ago. To Shiites, he is their most important martyr. Back to the city centre, with the brand new metro line number 1, towards Imam Khomeini Square.
This is rush hour in Tehran. First. I'm going to go and see that drummer, the guy we met in the taxi. He says I can go and listen to his band, so I'll head up to North Tehran.
I'm worried about you if you are going to be lost. You're in Tehran, you cannot speak Farsi.
No problem. I'll find my way, no problem. Okay.
Go out.
Well, I'll see you later, yeah? See you tonight.
See you.
Okay. Yeah, Bunny Payong. I don't know what I'm going to see with the taxi driver, but his music was pretty cool. He seemed like a good guy, so yeah, why not? Let's try it, follow it up, see what happens.
It seems to be the right part of town, but which street and which house? Better to ask again. Mostarim means straight ahead.
Well, I still don't know where I'm going, but I will find it.
Ali Reza's band plays illegally. We walk, but we don't get ahead, they sing. Like in a cage we live, imprisoned. The world is turning, but we are stuck. Balgard, or Helicopter, is the name of the band. Their music is available only in Canada or on the internet.
It's very hard for me to understand the two different sides of the things I see in Iran.
It's hard. Actually, it's hard for us too. if the music is okay, so everyone should play, and the people should vote for good music and bad music. Distortion guitars are not allowed. That's and powerful drums are not allowed.
Is there a government list of things that no distortion?
Yes.
Actually, no wah-wah pedals.
Yeah, like that, We have so many fans here. They never see us playing live for them.
And there's no way at all that you will ever get permission?
It's too dangerous. No, it's too dangerous.
Hey people, let's do our own thing, they say in the song Mirim O Mirim. In this world, there is no space for us.
In the CD label, you see none of our faces and not our original names. There are some nicknames like Yusheng, Teban, Chak, and no photos of us. But we have now on Facebook some of our photos in live performance, so it's a step to show our faces now. But the greatest thing would be to play for our guys in Tehran. It would be the greatest.
Do you think that could happen?
No, I don't.
Not in
No.
a long time.
Bradley and Arash want to move on. From Tehran, the Silk Road leads straight eastward to Afghanistan, but the Polos took a different way, and so does Bradley.
I've been following the main Silk Road from Tabriz going through Tehran, and then I'm actually branching off south now, following like an extension of the Silk Road that connected the main Silk Road to the sea.
The Polos traveled south through the vast deserts of Iran towards the Persian Gulf. Their initial plan was to travel by ship to India and continue from there overland to China. The truck stops on the highways are modern-day caravanserais, the oases of the truck drivers. Arash negotiates a lift on motorway 71.
Truck drivers are great. This guy wasn't going our way, but yeah, generally it's good. Lots of short stops. We're kind of hopping in between oases, which is what the people like Marco Polo and the old caravans would have done. They never went, from one part of the continent to the other in one stretch. They were always going little stretches. So, but yeah, it's good. The drivers are friendly, and there's no alcohol here, so there's no drink driving, which is great.
You never have to wait long, and if the cabin is already full, people shift up to make space.
For me, Iran is the most surprising place on the trip so far. It's got such a terrible reputation. I told my wife and family I was going to Iran. I'm sure they're all completely worried about me. But it's been completely different from what I expected. Very friendly people, very young. Lots of invitations for tea, dinner. It's just been the most delightful place to travel. We didn't quite get as far as the Persian Gulf, but it's getting late. And this is one of the nicest oasis towns of central Iran, so we're going to stay here for the night.
Marco Polo stopped here as well. He passed through almost all of the oasis towns of the great Iranian desert. They line up like beads on a string. This is one of the smaller ones. Kashan is not exactly bustling at night, but Arash and Bradley have heard about a very old and very Persian tradition. The sound of prayer and recitation leads them to the Zurkaneh, which literally means house of strength. The athletes start by praying and reciting verses from the Persian epics. The tradition reaches back into Iran's pre-Islamic past. The exercises begin. Some of them have their roots in Sufism, the mystical face of Islam. The aim is to maximize courage, selflessness, and strength. In earlier times, the ancient sport was a way to keep the men fit for war. The Zurkhaneh tradition was outlawed when Islam conquered the Persian Empire in the 7th century. Later, it found its way into Islamic culture, here's Bradley. The Murshid, the master of the group, marks rhythm and controls the pace of the exercises with clubs of different size and weight. The heaviest clubs weigh 20 kilos each. Respect for ethical values, faith in the Prophet, and loyalty to the Imams. This is what makes a true Iranian Pahlavan today. Pahlavan means hero as well as wrestler. There is a strict hierarchy. There are beginners, regular heroes, strong heroes, and national heroes, and even world heroes. On the road once again through the Dashti Kavir, the Great Salt Desert. These craftsmen are heading for the ancient oasis city of Yazd in central Iran. On their way, they have business to do at the foot of these mountains. The Persian Qanat system is 4,000 years old. Marco Polo described it, and here, in this region, lies its origin. A qanat is an ancient drinking water channel. From the foot of the mountains, water is channeled underground into the oases to prevent it from evaporating or becoming polluted.
This qanat system may just look like a hole in the ground, but really it's the lifeblood of the desert. Without this system of water, there wouldn't be these oasis towns. Without the oasis towns, there wouldn't be these trade centres, these trade routes. The Silk Road round here would bypass it. Marco Polo wouldn't have come down here. So you've got this little hole in the ground to thank for all of that stuff.
قدیمی شده دیگه، حالا نه صرفش نمیکنه، زحمت داره، ترس داره، هول داره به قول ما یزدی‌ها. نسل جوان حالا ما دیگه مگر اون دیگه با اصطلاح امروز چیه؟ کامپیوتر رو از این حرفا بیان کارا بکنن دیگه. کارایی که ما میکنیم محاله.
Almost 30,000 qanats, a system of 300,000 kilometers, provides for villages and cities in Iran to the present day.
Hope to see you again, Marco Polo.
Some of these qanats are 70 meters deep. This one's not quite that deep, but still it's very small and it feels very claustrophobic. But the water is crystal clear and beautifully cool. It's just wonderful. This is great. I never thought I'd be this close to a Persian qanat.
One of the world's oldest cities. Its origins stretch 7,000 years into the past. The old town of Yazd, built on sun-dried clay, a labyrinth of narrow streets. Above the rooftops loom badgirs, wind catchers, which are cooling down the blazing midsummer heat. The city's skyline didn't look very different when Marco Polo was here. He would certainly have seen the Friday Mosque. It remains in place, although its appearance was altered in the 14th century some 100 years after Marco Polo. Its richly adorned interior is vaulted by a self-supporting dome. The technique of constructing such domes was first invented by Persian master builders.
You can imagine you being on a caravan through the desert for several days. As you see this blue, the portals of the mosques, you see the tall minarets from probably 2 days before you even get there. And you come in and you've got cool water, you've got running streams, you've got these badgias which bring all the cooled air. It's an oasis of sophistication for travellers. They'd have been very glad to pull into Yazd for sure.
In his book, a travel log entitled The Wonders of the World, Marco Polo writes,
Yazdi also is properly in Persia. It is a good and noble city and has a great amount of trade. They weave their quantities of a certain silk tissue known as Yazdi, which merchants carry into many quarters to dispose of. This, I think, is the terme brocade that the city was famous for. So it'll be interesting to head down into the bazaar. You see this line of domes or cupolas? That's the roof of the bazaar. So it'll be interesting to head down there and see if they're still selling this after a good 700 years since Marco Polo was here.
For 2,000 years, henna has been ground in the mills of Yazd. In former days, they were powered by camels. In a Persian bazaar, craft and trade lie side by side. The silk tissue described by Marco Polo was in great demand in Venice by the rich and beautiful. The material embroidered with gold and silver thread was called broccato by the merchants of Venice, meaning embroidery.
This stuff is brocade. There's different types. There's the silk tissue, there's the brocade and the cloth. And this stuff would have been traded up and down the Silk Road. It was a high value, low weight commodity. So it would have been traded all the way through to Venice, where I'm sure this would have been on for sale somewhere in the Rialto Square. And some Venetian prince, probably a relative of Marco Polo, would have bought some at some point.
The neighborhood of Elabad at the edge of the city. Almost all the houses around here have been abandoned.
Seems like this place is completely deserted.
Once Yazd was the center of Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion. Its god was worshipped in the form of fire. Only very few fire worshippers are left here. Farah and her husband Banu are the last ones in this road. All their children and grandchildren have moved away. Most of them to America, Bradley understands. Others to Canada and Tehran. Today, the Zoroastrians are scattered all over the world. Arash tries to find reasons for the decline of the religion in its country of origin. Most of the people here were farmers, says Banu. As water has become increasingly expensive, many Zoroastrians moved away. From originally 500 people in this quarter, there are just 10 left. The Islamic Republic of Iran granted them the status of a protected religious minority. Nevertheless, Zoroastrians feel marginalized.
Yeah, Yazd was really the heartland of the Zoroastrian community in Iran and pretty much in the world. Since then, there's a lot of moved away to India, where they're the Farsi, Parsi community. But yeah, it's in its heart, and it's in the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's not much space left for Zoroastrians.
Not far from Farah's house is the small neighborhood temple. deity, Ahura Mazda, is worshipped in the form of a flame. Between 1000 and 1500 BC, Zoroaster founded his religion as the first monotheistic religion of humanity.
Yeah, 180 seats and just a handful of Zoroastrians left. It feels like the last echo of a disappearing religion to me.
On the southern edge of the city, the Towers of Silence. For the fire worshippers of Yazd, the final resting place.
This is where the Zoroastrians come to dispose of their bodies. They believe that burying them in the ground is polluting the earth. So the bodies would have been laid here, cut up, and then left for the sun and the vultures, and the bones would have fallen down into this hole.
In the 1970s, this type of burial was forbidden. Nowadays, the youth of the city meet at the Towers of Silence for motocross.
Do you guys know that this is a Zoroastrian graveyard? Would you do the same thing if this was an Islamic graveyard?
Bradley and Arash want to go further south. This time they've decided to hire a car, which in Iran can be found at any street corner.
Another class ride, as you can see. This is a Paykan car, Iran's national car. The design's hardly changed in 45 years, but hopefully it'll get us through the desert.
Let's go, Marco Polo.
About 750 years ago, Marco Polo, together with his father and uncle, must have passed by here somewhere. They needed to cross these mountains. But which route did they take exactly?
One of the easiest crossings where there's habitation. So I'm pretty sure he would have gone on either of these two routes. We could take the highway and we'd be down on the coast in about 4 hours. But we're going to make life difficult for ourselves and try and take one of these mountain paths and try and match the topography with Marco Polo's description. Well, this is what travelling's all about for me. Tracking down routes, places, doing some detective work, digging around a little bit, asking people about what they know about the route. This is what guidebook writing is, and this is right up my street. It's great.
Bradley and Arash have left the desert plains behind them. Now they are looking for a way through the mountains that separate the desert from the Persian Gulf. Silent witnesses to the Silk Road line the route. Deserted oases, the ruins of caravanserais. Almost like a modern-day travel guide, the Venetian writes of wells, provision points, and places to sleep along the route to the Persian Gulf. He also points out goods and resources along the route. Rare metals, for instance. Marco Polo mentions veins of iron from which a high-grade steel was smelted to forge swords, armor, and shields. Information on such commodities was of great strategic value at the time. Still today, this part of Iran is well known for mining and smelting.
This is very impressive. You can feel the heat on your face, you can smell the chemicals in the air. This is exactly what Marco Polo was writing about when he talked about the heavy metals in the area, the iron, the copper. He even talks about smelting and furnaces. So yeah, we were lucky we just bumped into this. It's just by the side of the road. It just fits in perfectly.
Apart from metals, he also reports on the murderous black bandits of these mountains, the Karaunas.
If you see someone trying to flag us down, you just keep going straight, okay? Don't stop. You can see we're now descending down to the coastal plains. This is where Marco Polo writes about the Karaunas, this kind of strange half-Mongol, half-Baluchi collection of bandits. He reckons 10,000 bandits roamed this area and had the ability to create this black fog over the whole kind of plain here, and then they would come across and pick up anybody they could find, sell them into slavery or kill them.
Where the mountains drop to the sea lies Arash and Bradley's destination. In the Middle Ages, the old port of Hormuz was located somewhere here. The Polos were planning to travel by ship to India and to get from there to China.
Not much left, just a narrow waterway, a few dhows. It's just a faint echo, really, of what Marco Polo would have seen when he came here.
Dhows, the Arabian coastal vessels, are still at anchor, and dates are loaded as in earlier days.
Now Marco Polo says their ships are wretched affairs, and many of them get lost. And then he goes on to say, hence 'tis a perilous business to go on a voyage in one of these ships, and many of them are lost, for in that sea of India the storms are often terrible. So when Marco Polo came here, he was far from impressed with the quality of the boats, but looking at them here, they're not modern boats, but they're in good shape. They look pretty good for a sea crossing, so the ones Marco Polo must have seen. I mean, he was a Venetian, he knew his boats.
Why, in the end, didn't Marco Polo board a ship to India? Why did he reject his initial plan? Perhaps the clue lies on a small offshore island in the Persian Gulf. In the 2,000-year-old city of Laft, the old wooden cargo vessels are still being constructed to this day. His day begins in the mosque. Haji Zakaria Safari has sailed on dhows as far as India and East Africa. Nobody knows more about dhows and their construction. After working as a captain for more than 40 years, he now runs his own shipyard. Today, the sailing vessels are equipped with diesel engines, but they still sail the coastal waters of the Indian Ocean. Perhaps Haji Safari can explain why Marco Polo didn't trust the Arabic sailing vessels. Arash asks about the differences between the dhows of the Middle Ages and the dhows of today.
البته اولا بوم ساختن سنبوک ساختن یه دو نمونه دیگر و اما بعد که پاکستان و هندوستان از یک طرز دیگه عوض کرد ساخت حالا ما همون طرزی که پاکستان و هند میسازه داره میسازه ترسش الکی بوده ترس نداره نه تناب ترس داره نه میخ ترس داره نه چوبی ترس داره
I mean, Haji's boats look great. I mean, they're really, really well made, first class. But you can imagine 700 years ago, and they were held together with bits of coconut rope and fish fat, that they probably looked pretty bad to Marco Polo's eyes. And I mean, this was a serious decision for Marco Polo. This was the real hinge point of his trip, a real pivotal moment. And these boats, he must have thought these boats were really awful to choose this unknown route through the deserts of Asia rather than this maritime route to India. My own personal theory, maybe he just got here and he was told, 6 months until the monsoon winds come, you've got to sit here in the baking 45-degree heat for the next 6 months, and he just went, no way, I can't take it. I'd rather go through the deserts and see what happens there.
Arash flies back to Tehran. And Bradley Mayhew, like Marco Polo, will continue his journey to China overland.
There's space for one, Mashhad.
Bradley is now heading northeast. It takes 1,000 kilometers to cross through the largest of the Iranian deserts, the Dasht Ilut. Any transport is welcome, as long as it comes.
Hi honey, it's me. And how things at home? Yep. Oh great, that's good. Yeah, Afghanistan is next. Yeah, I know, I'm going to take care, don't worry. Yeah, I should be crossing over the border in a day or two.
Afghanistan. There has been almost continuous war here for 30 years. Ahead of Bradley lies no easy terrain. The first city behind the border. In the center looms the citadel. Over and over again it was destroyed and repeatedly rebuilt. The latest wars have also left their mark. Today, the citadel is restored. The architect Daoud Sadiq directs the construction work.
And was this bombed also by the Soviets in the 1980s?
Yeah, absolutely. There was absolutely. Here was the Soviet Union, and the western side was the Mujahideen. They were attacking directly to the citadel.
And the people in the city was in between. Herat's seen a lot of violence for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Daoud works for the Aga Khan Foundation, which helps to bring some sort of peaceful normality back into the Afghanis' everyday lives. To restore landmark buildings is part of that process. People can once again enjoy their citadel. Before restoration can begin, mines and unexploded ordnance have to be cleared. It will take decades to free the land from this particularly dangerous threat, assuming that's even possible. Marco Polo found the melons of this region to be the sweetest and juiciest in the world.
Yeah, take this one. I'm meeting a lady at her office, so I think I should take a gift. It's melon season, so this one will do.
Bradley wants to get to the outskirts of Herat. There, a special Afghani aid organization is located in a plain red brick building. Hakima Hakimi is 25 years old. She has studied law in Tehran, and today she represents women in court. But mainly she fights for the many street children in Herat.
This isn't just a normal school, is it?
They are here for 2 hours during the day because they work in the streets and they need to earn money to protect their family and to help their parents. Most of their parents, especially their fathers, are addicted and they are jobless and they don't work, so they can support their family.
So it's a safe place for them. They can come during the day for a few hours.
They aren't safe out of here, in the streets, in their home. But we try to make a safe and a friendly place for them.
Not long ago, there was fighting in the streets of Herat. Slowly, normality is returning. The merchants are back, as well as the artisans. Sayadullah, for example, he is one of the last remaining men who still knows how to blow the famous Herat glass. The deep blue comes from lapis lazuli, which is mined in the mountains of Afghanistan, and about which Marco Polo reported. Only in a relatively peaceful city like Herat, an Afghani woman and a stranger can walk the city streets without harassment. During the time of the Taliban, the city's music school was closed. Now the tabla and harmonium classes are very much in demand. Soon, women will be admitted too. Music classes are, at least in Herat, once again a part of normal life.
Taliban didn't believe to music and the movie, cinema, everything, because they told that we are the original Muslims, and Islam don't allow you to listen music, to studying music, to teaching music. Music was off.
Off. So you just turned it off.
For everywhere and for everyone. The Taliban forced women to stay at home and don't studying and don't learning, and to their fathers get married them without asking them. They don't like their husbands, they don't like their lives, and they don't like their children.
They are victims of archaic traditions, of war and drugs. Hakima will continue to take care of Herat's children. Bradley has to say goodbye now. He wants to get to the north of Afghanistan.
I actually feel quite safe in Herat. Feels just like a normal city. But I've been told over and over again that anything can happen at any time. It's a very fluid situation. There's violence always on the edge of town, so I'm getting on in years, and I'm a married man now, so I'm going to take the easy option, divert from Marco Polo a little bit, take a shortcut by plane over to Mazar-e Sharif, and avoid the dangerous road in between.
The road from Herat to the north is said to be amongst the most dangerous in the whole country. Bandits are more of a risk here than the Taliban. Kidnapping is a profitable business. overland drive would have taken 2 days. By plane, it takes just about 2 hours to the biggest city in northern Afghanistan. The city grew up around this shrine. It is the only sanctuary in which both rival religious factions, the Shiites and the Sunnis, pray together. This shrine has always been a place of peace, until the Taliban came.
During the Taliban days, the Taliban actually ate the pigeons and killed the rest of them. And since the Taliban left, the pigeons have come back slowly. Locals see that as a sign, I think, for the continuing and increasing peace in Afghanistan. So it's a kind of a symbol for hope in Mazar. It's nice to see them back in.
The Hazrat Ali Shrine is the most important pilgrimage destination in Afghanistan. Here, the Prophet's son-in-law is said to be buried, the last leader of the Muslims before Islam was divided into Shiite and Sunni factions. That is why people pray here together. Conflicts in Afghanistan are countless, between tribes, between warlords, between the government and the Taliban. At the Hazrat Ali Shrine, all that seems far away.
This is what I dreamed of. I've been reading of Afghanistan for 20 years, and what I've been dreaming of is right here. It's very special for me.
The peace here is deceptive. A traveler should always keep this in mind.
Yeah, outside the mosque when the sun goes down, I wouldn't want to be there. But with the sun up, inside the mosque during prayer time, it's a brief moment of relaxation before the guards come back up again when we head outside. So.
Only with an armed guard can Bradley dare to enter an area which is considered to be dangerous, in which the Taliban have once again gained in strength. The drive takes Bradley back in time. From the beginnings of the caravan trade up until the 13th century, this was the vibrant heart of the Silk Road. The large adobe walls indicate its former size. Although to a considerable extent already destroyed, the city impressed Marco Polo, the legendary city of Balkh.
Balkh is a noble city and great. And there were formerly many fine palaces and buildings of marble, and the ruins of them still remain. Well, this is the ancient city of Balkh. This is where Zarathustra first worshipped fire, first came up with Zoroastrianism. This was also where Alexander the Great founded his first city here in this part of Asia. Actually, Marco Polo says this was where he married the beautiful Roxana.
Balkh's wealth attracted conquerors. Alexander was followed by Scythians, Parthians, and by the nomadic Kushan. In the 1st century after Christ, Balkh was the center of the huge territory they controlled.
The Kushan Empire spread all the way from Mediterranean to India and northwest China, and this was the glory days of the Silk Road when the caravans crossed the whole of Asia throughout the Kushan Empire.
After the Buddhist Kushan, Arabic Islamic dynasties took over, and then came Genghis Khan.
In 1220, the Mongols pulled up outside of Balkh, marched the 100,000 plus inhabitants out onto the plain, divided them up into neat little sections, slaughtered them to a man. Balkh itself never really recovered from that. It fell into decline. Malaria and cholera took hold outside the city, and Marco Polo actually got sick around Balkh, probably from malaria, and had to go up to the mountains of Badakhshan to recover from that.
The mountains in the northeast of Afghanistan are also Bradley's destination. Unfortunately, the route leads through a risky area. Luckily for Bradley, the International Security Assistance Force for Afghanistan helps him out with a seat in one of their planes. The north of Afghanistan is under the command of the German Armed Forces. The Germans patrol the most remote and wild part of Afghanistan's north, the province of Badakhshan.
Salam. Lajwad. Lapis. Polish. Polish lapis. Mines of Badakhshan have been supplying almost the entire world's production of lapis for the last 6,000-7,000 years. Everyone from Cleopatra to the Romans, Mesopotamians, they all wanted this stuff. It's very prized, worth its weight in gold in classical times. And Marco Polo was the first person to locate the European world where the lapis came from. It was a big mystery up until then. There are mines up here in Badakhshan somewhere. We're going to try and locate them, try and see where this stuff comes from. I've heard it's a long, difficult trek, but give it a go.
The route will lead Bradley into an area where Western foreigners should avoid attracting too much attention.
We're getting some local fashion tips from the Pfizer buddies. They say this one's the way to go, so I trust them. I'm not sure if I should be offended when they say this is my size.
Wearing a shalwar kameez, the traditional Afghan dress, Bradley starts his search for the blue stone. Bradley, 40 years old, British, married, lives in the United States. He couldn't be further away from home.
See, this tie's even worse than the last one.
In a village, Bradley is expected by Ibrahim Mazoon.
Oh, good to see you. Nice to see you. Welcome to Borak. You can hand over your...
Ibrahim works for the Aga Khan Foundation, one of the few organizations to bring assistance to the mountain farmers in this remote region. Farmland is rare. Only in the narrow river valleys and only on irrigated fields can farmers grow food. Without the help of the Aga Khan Foundation, the farmers would probably still grow opium. Now they have an alternative. The villagers do all the work by themselves. A new canal, 2 kilometers long, will bring water to new fields. To cut it out of the rock, mere picks and spades are not enough. In this part of Afghanistan, dynamite is a blessing. Ibrahim has organized a good car with a good driver. Even so, it takes the Jeep more than 6 hours to cover the last 30 kilometers. Then, heavily guarded, the mining village. Since ancient times, this has been the base of the lapis lazuli miners. there are 30 to 40 mines in the mountains above the village, according to Aga Saeed. He has been living here for 50 years. As ultramarine, the blue from beyond the sea, lapis lazuli was frequently used by medieval painters. Marco Polo describes the mineral and its mining in detail. Even today, up to 2,000 men work in the mines during the summer.
There are mines dotted all up and down this valley. There's one right up there that I would love to go in and have a look, but the security situation is not good. The precious stones are almost as dodgy a topic as opium production around here, so this is as far as the police allow me to go.
اونا که داخل میرن و در اون خطوری که با گذاری گیسو میرن شخص سفید است باز که فایر میپرونن میزنن بازی رک میبره این رک بار آمد بازی رک که زده رفتن بازی کلان میشن کلان که شد بود در داخلی رک لوجوار میبره این نتیجهش همیست که دمی رک میبره.
The cornflower blue pigment is now produced artificially. But for best quality stones, the men still get good money.
This was actually a very important center for the Mujahideen. They would take big donkey loads full of the lapis and then carry it over the Hindu Kush, over the passes into Pakistan, sell it for US dollars, and then buy missiles. And that was one way that they funded the resistance against the Soviets. So this place has a really fascinating history, whether it's 20 years ago or 2,000 years ago. It's as economically vibrant as it was back then.
Thank you.
The last stretch of road in Afghanistan. The beard trimmed, a fresh shirt. A last wrecked tank on the roadside. For 3 weeks, Bradley has been on the road in this war-torn country, and he is glad that everything went well.
Keeping me safe and sound in Afghanistan.
Thanks in no small part to Ibrahim Mazoon and Mohammed the driver. They will meet again. Inshallah. God willing. On the border of Afghanistan and Tajikistan, a unique market is held every Saturday.
No man's land. This side Afghanistan, this side Tajikistan, on an island in the middle of the Panj River, the upper Oxus, Amudarya. On this side are all the Afghan traders, on this side all the Tajik traders. Superb market. Canned goods from Russia. Coca-Cola, made in Afghanistan. Rice from Peshawar in Pakistan. Soap powder from Iran this way. Washing up liquid from Turkey even further. Classic Silk Road market. Marco Polo would have loved it. Headscarf from Tajikistan. Just like this one.
Tajikistan, a small country in Central Asia. For more than 50 years, it was part of the Soviet Union. People are celebrating in Ishkashim's stadium. 13 years ago to the day, the civil war in Tajikistan ended. It started right after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 and plunged the country into chaos.
Welcome to the Republic of Tajikistan, celebrating the, over 10 years ago was the end of the Civil War, so there's a big parade here to celebrate that. Feels like a giant leap in time from the Afghan border. In some ways it feels like coming straight into the future, but not quite now, more like 20 years ago when the Soviet Union was still around.
He has already crossed 6 countries on his way to China. Tajikistan is like coming home for Bradley. He has been here many times. And here he is not only asking about Marco Polo, but also room rates, with and without breakfast.
So how much is the price just for sleeping?
It's $8.
Okay. And when do you think those rooms will be ready?
They're now working fast, maybe after a week, 2 weeks maximum.
Okay. Yeah, here in Tajikistan I'm doing 2 jobs at the same time. And not only trying to track down Marco Polo's route, but doing my day job at the same time, updating the Lonely Planet Guide to Central Asia. So it's a lot of trying to track down accommodation, detective work really. Transport stuff, it's really my bread and butter work. This is what I do day in and day out. This is a day at the office for me on my normal job.
To search for traces of Marco Polo, who passed by here 750 years ago, Bradley has teamed up with ethnologist Umid Bulbul Shoev, a friend he knows from an earlier journey. The two plan to travel together for at least 2 weeks. You buy provisions straight out of the back of a truck here. But the most important thing is to find a reliable car and driver.
Filling up with some dodgy side petrol. A couple of guys with some jerry cans just brought it down the street. This is a petrol station in Tajikistan. Hopefully it's good petrol. If it's not, we'll find out in about 30 kilometers. Let's go.
With his 35-year-old Soviet Jeep, Shob Kadyrov, 47 years old, normally brings passengers to the Tajik capital, Dushanbe. But he also knows his way around the so-called Wakhan corridor. The Wakhan Valley cuts right through the mighty mountain ranges as its most important east-west passage. Armies, missionaries, and traders like Marco Polo have trekked through this valley since time immemorial. A southern branch of the Silk Road ran straight through the valley, and some of its ancient rest stops are still in use. Bradley and Umid are looking for a place to stay. The people here are Ismailis, a small subsect of Shia Islam. Their songs tell about the arduous life in one of the poorest regions of Central Asia. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the people here were hit especially hard. Little grows at this altitude, and local people still struggle to make a living. But whenever guests arrive, they offer whatever they have.
"15-20 years ago, the country was in civil war, and the palmies here, although they look so beautiful and idyllic, they were almost on the verge of starvation here. And there's very few economic opportunities in this valley and in most of the Pamirs and Badakhshan. So tourism is really one of the very few ways to get a little extra income, a little influx of cash into the local economy.
Bradley and Umid are shown around by the Khalifa, the secular and religious head of the community. The shrine was one of the places where their unique brand of Islam survived during the Soviet times. Ismailis have no mosques, no call to prayer.
این را من نکردم. در دوره سویتی هم مردم در روزهای عیدهای مسلمانی، عید قربان، عید رمضان مردم در همین مزار جمع می‌شدند. خیر خدایی می‌دادند.
So during Soviet Union time, these kind of shrines didn't stop, but they were used by people, used them as a religious site, but from the government side they were announced as a historical site, and therefore they were protected.
When a house is built in the village, the whole community turns out to help. The Khalifa blesses the building. The Ismailis follow a relaxed and undogmatic form of Islam that is rooted in daily life. After praying together, they will eat together and then work together. Marco Polo is said to have spent several months in the Wakhan corridor, recuperating from an illness, probably malaria. Old, partly ancient fortifications tower above a strategically important stretch of the trade route. Often, the exact route of the Silk Road is mere guesswork. Here, it is right before your eyes.
There would have been caravanserais here, probably Bactrian camels winding their way down this valley. This was good travel, easy travel down this valley. It was one of the favoured routes over the high mountains of the Pamirs. So,
They brought with this way many technology, melting iron technology, gunpowder.
ideas, music, art, it all kind of meshed as different cultures met on these trade routes. They would take away ideas and take them away back to their land. So that's really the legacy of the Silk Road. But yeah, it's amazing to be actually right in the spot where Marco Polo would have stood, rested for the night, and should I go left, should I go right? One of those pivotal decisions for him, and carried on that way. So it's, yeah, another place where you can really connect to Marco Polo's trip. And the scene hasn't changed, I mean, since he was there, definitely. It's right here.
From here, Marco Polo continued onto a high-altitude plain, the Pamir Plateau. Driver Shob knows he can rely on his Soviet Jeep, model WAZ 469, provided he doesn't push it too hard. As long as he doesn't go faster than 30 kilometers per hour, his aging vehicle handles the rough roads and the extreme altitude with ease. The military Jeep, manufactured in the Stalin plant at Ulyanovsk, is more or less indestructible.
This is saying it's like his child. This is his child. I suggested it was like his friend. He says it's like his child. Yeah, the great thing about these Soviet Jeeps is that they're very easy to repair. You can, anything, you have a hammer and a bit of string and you can pretty much repair everything in here. They're very slow, they're very uncomfortable, you can't see anything out the windows, and they smell of petrol all the time. But apart from that, they're perfect.
Then the road leads through a mountain desert, 3,500 meters high, described by Marco Polo as cold, windy, without vegetation, the Pamir Plateau. It's getting dark when the jeep turns into a remote valley. Bradley knows from a previous visit that Kyrgyz nomads set up camp here during the summer. They pitch their yurts where meltwater allows a little bit of grass to sprout. Hospitality is a matter of course up here. Without hesitation, Shamsi Kulubayev invites the three travelers to stay overnight. It gets freezing cold at night. Terescan bushes are the only available fuel up here to heat the yurt or cook their salted milk tea. The problem is, there are almost no Terescan bushes left. During Soviet times, says Umid, you were supplied with coal and it was forbidden to heat with Terescan, right?
Запрещалось, в общем, копать. А те, люди, которые постоянно зимой и летом жили в горах, ну, они топили. А так в кишлаках, вот там, в районном центре, не взяли, не топили. Достанем бензин, продаем овцы, продаем козы или вот эти яки, за это купим, сколько бы не было дорого бензин.
He says, I think it doesn't matter how much it will be, but we have no another choice. I think we will buy, we will sell our yaks or something else, and to find fuel and coal to go as far as it is possible to bring it.
In the high valleys of the Pamir, the herders live with their yaks in near self-sufficiency. When the Terescan is gone, this will not be possible anymore. The nomads need cash in order to buy alternative sources of fuel. Maybe in the future, it can be earned from tourists that find their way into these beautiful remote valleys.
Marco Polo was spot on about the cold. I needed my sleeping bag last night and the water in my water bottle froze, so he got that one right. I have a feeling he was up here.
Come on guys, what's going on? John, what's going on?
The severe cold even creates problems for the jeep. Despite this, in the next edition of his guidebook, Bradley will definitely recommend this homestay with Shamsi Kulumbayev on the Pamir Plateau. In the very east of Tajikistan, China is just behind these mountains. Bradley and Umid reach the only noteworthy town on the Pamir Plateau. Here, their ways will part. Umid will return with the jeep. All that remains for Bradley is to say thanks. And to negotiate a ride to China. The Chinese truckers, they are heading in the right direction. Beyond the Pamir Plateau begins the Taklamakan, the world's second largest sand desert. On its western fringes lies an ancient oasis town that has changed dramatically since Marco Polo's time.
Well, finally made it to China. The good news is no more border crossings. The bad news is still only 2/3 of the way through the trip. a long way to go still through China, but it's good to be here. This is one of Asia's great market towns.
Kashgar today is a big modern city, like so many in China. Han Chinese dominate the sea in the center of town, and the Uyghurs, with their typical skull caps, appear quite marginalized, even though they were once the rulers of this region. The 8 million Uyghurs are only one out of many minorities in China. They are a Muslim minority that has recently become embroiled in a bloody conflict with the government in Beijing.
Well, the Uyghurs are a Turkic people. They're very much Central Asian in their lifestyle, kind of marooned up here in the corners, northwest corner of China. Don't really have much in common with the Chinese. The food's different, the language is different. They're Muslim, so there's not much in common with the local Chinese.
Without consultation, the government has almost completely demolished the traditional clay-built old town of the Uyghurs and resettled the Uyghurs in high rises. Only a small portion of the old Uyghur town remains. Here, the locals can stay, as long as they don't mind being stared at by Chinese tourists who pay a fee to enter. The last remaining Uyghur quarter has become a museum.
Xinjiang, like Tibet, is one of those places where there's been mass Han Chinese migration. There's just not enough space in China for all the people that want some land. So my feeling is that the Uyghurs have been really marginalized. They've kind of been pushed to the edge of society. Their lands have been squeezed. Their old towns have been squeezed and surrounded by this island of modern Chinese city. So I think there's a lot of deep-held resentment, frustration amongst the Uyghurs, and sometimes it boils over a little bit.
Kashgar, the Silk Road splits into a southern and a northern route. Both skirt the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. Marco Polo traveled the southern route. Along here lies an oasis town that is famous for the fabric that gave its name to the trade route. In Hotan, families weave atlas silk, colorful, strong, and very sturdy. Clothes made from atlas silk are worn across Central Asia, but they originate from here. Only a few families still weave silk. For example, the family of Mehmet Ali. It's just not profitable anymore, Bradley learns. Hand-woven fabrics are far too expensive, almost impossible to sell, says Mehmet Ali. How silkworms are bred, how their cocoons are spun, this was China's great secret. It was here in Hotan that the secret was spilled.
Europe had no idea what silk was about. They thought it grew on trees. They thought it was some kind of white fluffy vegetable or something. They didn't have a clue. The story goes that there was a princess being married out to a Uyghur prince around about the 6th century. And she was headed out towards these barbarian lands outside the Great Wall. And she couldn't bear life without her little luxury of silk, so she hid these little silkworm eggs in a big elaborate hairdo so that the customs officials couldn't see her. And then the secret was out. They couldn't hold it in any longer.
The tradition dates back 1400 years, says Mehmet Ali. However, Mehmet Ali long since branched out into a different market, one that takes place every Friday. At the early age of 13, Mehmet Ali entered into a trade where you can make or break a fortune. Even for professionals, it can be tricky to tell real jade from fake. Traders from all over China come to haggle over green, white or yellow jade. The Chinese imperial seal was always made of jade. Jade brings luck, heals illness, holds magical powers.
Well, the Chinese have loved this stone for thousands of years, everything from medicine to ground it up for immortality as a potion. They attribute different kind of qualities to the stone, like the hardness is supposed to symbolize justice, the warm kind of shine of the stone is supposed to, you know, show humanity and man's quality, but it's a very Chinese thing.
And from this river comes the jade. In former times, people searched for them at full moon nights, feeling them in the riverbed with their bare feet. Mehmet Ali doesn't waste his time on such small-scale methods. He has leased a piece of land further upstream.
Looking for jade, 21st century Chinese style.
Mehmet Ali has borrowed a lot of money to buy an excavator. With a practiced eye, the men pick the jade directly from the excavator shovel. A 3-kilo piece of jade recently earned Mehmet Ali €40,000. Enough to repay his loan on the spot. 50,000 people work in the jade business, says Mehmet Ali. 30,000 look for jade. The rest work as traders. And everybody hopes for the big find. Marco Polo describes one landscape in great detail, the Taklamakan Desert. Taklamakan means go in and you will never come out again. Beyond the Taklamakan lies the Lop Desert, then the Gobi. Three days later, Bradley has scored a luxurious ride.
I just managed to get this very, very sweet ride with Mr. Yen. He's going back to Dunhuang. He tells me he works in the tourism industry there.
Whoever drives east on this route will inevitably pass a construction that extends over 6,500 kilometers and ranks among the 7 wonders of the world.
这是长城吗？
这个是汉长城。
挺好的，奔来的。
对，这是最原始的，对，对，很古老的。
还可以。This is a major point for me on the trip. It means that I've reached the beginning of the Chinese world, and it also means that I've reached the dividing line between China and the nomads to the north. So this is really a strategic point.
Marco Polo must have passed the Great Wall somewhere here, but he doesn't mention it at all in his book. For some historians, this is an indication that Marco Polo never made it to China.
The thing about the Great Wall is that its significance lies in its whole length. That's really the power of the Great Wall. And if you just see a section up close, it's not really worth remarking about. So I think that was partly Marco Polo's issue when he came past this section of the wall. But anyway, he probably didn't realize the significance of it.
Not far away is a fort, a gate that in ancient times provided caravans their only passage through the Great Wall. These days, tourist groups flock to this Silk Road landmark. This group came all the way from Shanghai to take pictures of each other in front of the famous Jade Gate.
Yeah, this is one of the great meeting points of Asia. It doesn't look like much, but this is where all the transcontinental trade routes from Asia all kind of funnel into the Hershey Corridor. This is a very romantic place, symbolizes the furthest point in the Chinese Empire.
From the Jade Gate, it is just about 70 kilometers to the oasis town of Dunhuang, which is where friendly driver Mr. Yen lives. Bradley asks whether Yen knows the old name of the town that Marco Polo used. Yen knows it, Shazhou, which means region of sand. 2,000 years ago, the oasis was founded as a caravan stop. Today, it is a spotlessly clean town of 200,000 inhabitants. Most of them are Han Chinese who have moved here from other parts of China to seek work. Especially in the tourism industry, Yen works in this field as well. Bradley learns that Yen actually has quite an unusual job. Yen is working at the edge of the oasis.
This is People's Liberation Army, great. Okay, I'm ready.
One of the world's largest deserts. It stretches almost all the way to Beijing, but that's still 2,500 kilometers away. Always along the Silk Road, right into the heartland of China, where Marco Polo spent almost 20 years of his life. Ever since ancient times, travelers have stocked up on provisions and changed camels in Dunhuang. In China's desert-like province of Gansu starts the final leg of his long journey. He's already crossed 7 countries so far. China is more or less home turf for Bradley Mayhew. A friend has helped him out with a contact who must live somewhere around here. Fan Ji-jun, 54 years old, in the camel business for 25 years. Camels. Without them, there would be no caravans, no trade, no Silk Road. These hardy animals can go for days without food or water and don't mind heat or sandstorms. But carrying loads, let alone people, is not in the camel's nature. That's where the camel trainer comes in.
训练好。哎呀，这光放这个鞍子呢，可能就得个4、5天才能把这个鞍子放好，它就适应了，慢慢放了，它就不害怕了。
Every day, Fan leads his animals into the nearby dunes to exercise. Marco Polo describes with great respect the Mingsha, or dunes of the singing sands. If a caravan got lost, it was doomed. Therefore, the men who led the caravans were highly respected.
You do as you're told, young camel.
当心一点啊，骆驼很贵的，一个骆驼要5000多块钱的啊，注意一点。
Ciao, 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 ciao. Oh, ciao, ciao. Oh, can't believe it. Good boy. Look at that. I'm a natural. Ciao. Oh, there you go. Oh, good boy.
你做得很好。
This is about as Marco Polo as it gets, I think. Leading camels through the Gobi Desert. This is pretty much all I ever dreamed Marco Polo did when I was reading his book as a kid. This is classic stuff.
Eventually, it is time for the camels to earn their keep. The breeding and training of camels had almost disappeared in the oasis until tourism introduced new business opportunities. 250,000 tourists visit the singing sands each year, and Fan is only one of many camel trainers. China's middle class is growing rapidly and has discovered the joy of traveling and vacationing in their own country.
This is mass industrial scale Chinese tourism. New economic power translates into having fun in the desert, in the sand dunes. So this is the future of tourism in China, it seems to me. Dunhuang, the Jade Gate, they're just as exotic to Chinese travelers as they are to foreign travelers.
When they passed through here, Marco Polo, his father and uncle, had been on the road for 2 years. Marco Polo hints at how the exhausted Venetians must have felt to find shelter, fresh food and drinking water after a long desert crossing.
Well, Marco Polo describes this 30-day crossing of the Lop Desert. He talks about the goblins and the demons, the sandstorms that would limit your vision to just a couple of feet. So when you finally reach the green of this desert oasis, this was really the first sense of Chinese civilization, the first taste that you were heading into a great culture. The desert crossing was over. It was a place to kind of relax a little bit and get ready for the journey on.
Traders would pray and make offerings before crossing the Gobi, and then make grateful donations after surviving the passage unscathed. In this way, on the eastern edge of this desert, a magical place came into being. 700 caves hold the world's largest treasure trove of early Buddhist art. Today, China protects the grottos tightly. Only a few are open to visitors, and only under the supervision of a guide. It has not been forgotten that in 1907, 2 European archaeologists, some say art thieves, smuggled large parts of the Mongao cave treasures to Europe. Rich traders endowed the cave monasteries with statues and ornate wall paintings that paid homage to Buddha, some dating back as far as the 4th century. They are perfectly preserved, thanks to the dry desert climate. The images depict episodes from the life of Buddha, his enlightenment, his teachings, and his sutras.
The image of the Buddha spread from Gandhara in modern-day Pakistan, came up over the mountains along the Silk Roads of Central Asia, and then dispersed all the way down through here, through China, into Japan, Korea, and every time slightly adapting, changing to the local styles, the local ways of thinking.
For centuries, the 700 caves of this monastery lay buried beneath the sands. In the year 1900, they were rediscovered, almost by chance.
The lost jewel, really, that was uncovered. It's beautiful. No, the real power of the Silk Road is that the Silk Road transported not only goods, spices, the real hard things, but it also ideas, music, art, religion, faiths, technology. That was the real wonder of the Silk Road, and you can see that represented really quite special and beautiful here.
Originating in India, Buddhism reached China in the 3rd century AD. By the 13th century, when Marco Polo was on his travels and China was ruled by the Mongols, Buddhism was the state religion in the Middle Kingdom.
This is one of the first places that Marco Polo met Buddhism. He wasn't too kind about it, called them idolaters. He wasn't very happy about all the Buddhist statues. But from now on, Buddhism would follow him all the way to Kublai's court.
But it's still 2,500 kilometers to Beijing.
This guy's trying to cheat. I know what you're doing. 你看我，我看你。这非常公平，你看他是看你。受不了，受不了。
They love it. They love it. There's a word in Chinese called renao, which is hot and noisy, which is like the absolute epitome of how things should be. Hot and steamy, noisy, shouting. It's sometimes it's too much, but a lot of the time it's great fun. Many lifetimes ago, when I was coming out of school, I decided for some reason, I still have no idea. Oh, well, there we go. Not quite sure to this day why. I decided to study Chinese at university. It was one of those decisions that just turns your life in a different direction, and for that I'm eternally grateful. You know, it opened my eyes to Asia and traveling. The first traveling I did was to practice my Chinese, really. So yeah, no, people thought I was crazy at the time. Now it's quite common to study Chinese, but 20 years ago, no one studied Chinese, and everyone was kind of scratching their heads, going, "What is he doing?" You know. But I'm pretty glad to have done it. Okay, so how do we play?
In Jiaoguan, the train crosses the Great Wall of China. The only way to pass through the Great Wall was through the gates of this fortress, built in 1372. Every school kid in China knows about Jiaoguan, the first pass under heaven. One of the most impressive landmarks along the Silk Road.
This is a hugely symbolic place in China. To the south, you've got the snow-capped Chilean mountains. Just to the north up there, you've got the Mahjong or Horsemane Mountains. And in between, you've got this little gap. And right here comes the end, very end of the Ming Dynasty, Great Wall of China. And this, for the Chinese, is the absolute end of the world. This is the end of civilization as they knew it. And from here marks the gate where all the travelers from Central Asia would come into here. So everyone, all the Silk Road traders, the missionaries, the refugees, the armies, they all funneled through this corridor right into the heartland of civilization.
Marco Polo doesn't mention the Great Wall at all. One reason why some historians question whether the Venetian even made it to China. There is no way he could have described Jiaoguan.
This didn't exist when Marco Polo came through here. Doubtless there were fortifications, doubtless this was still a strategic pass. There would have been some kind of garrison post here, but not quite on the scale that we see here.
Marco Polo's journey lasted from 1271 to 1295, a time when the Mongols ruled literally half of the world, from Beijing to Moscow to Hungary. At that time, Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, officiated as Emperor of China. Kublai's court was Marco Polo's ultimate goal. Here begins the so-called Hershey Corridor. For about 1,000 kilometers, it leads through the hostile Gobi Desert. The corridor is flanked by 2 mountain ranges and was the only route where water and food was readily available. Everybody had to pass through here. Ancient oases and garrison towns line the corridor like a string of pearls. This town, Marco Polo refers to it as Kanpichu, he must have particularly liked. He stayed here for more than a year. The town has even erected a monument to him. In China, everybody has heard about Marco Polo. The locals may not know many of the details, but one thing is for sure. Marco Polo was a good visitor. He described China in a positive, admiring way.
你好，你是什么地方的？地方人的。这个你听说了没有？那个 Marco Polo。
I mean, Marco Polo certainly was the first person to bring home a portrait of China, of a great and resurgent civilization that had been unified after hundreds of years of chaos. So, in some ways, that portrait of China is valid today. You know, it's coming up, emerging as a great superpower as it was back in the 13th century. So, in some ways, the situation is similar. You could call the party chairman the closest thing to Kublai Khan in this part of the world, for sure.
This temple was the alleged home of the mother of Kublai Khan. It's even possible that the Chinese emperor was born here. In his book, The Description of the World, Marco dedicates many chapters to the Mongols, their customs, their art of warfare. In Changyir, he focuses on Buddhism for the first time. He describes this temple of the great Buddha in great detail.
So in these, they have an enormous number of idols, both small and great, certain of the latter being a good 10 paces in stature. They're all highly polished and then covered with gold, and the great idols of which I speak lie at length. I'm pretty sure this is the one he saw. This is one of the few cases where Marco Polo wasn't actually exaggerating. He comes from definitely a medieval Christian background. He kind of disparages Buddhist followers as idolaters. But you can tell he's starting to warm to the place and warm to Buddhism a little bit as he goes along in his journey, especially when he reaches the court of Kublai Khan. He comes much more in contact with Buddhism, so he starts to kind of likening it a bit more to Christianity. He says they have a calendar and holy days like we do.
The next morning, Bradley is forced to hitch a ride. There are no buses to the mountains that rise just outside the town. Here at the foot of the snow-capped Kilian Shan, from the 4th century onwards, people began to carve out Buddhist grottos from the sandstone cliffs. Bradley learns that the Rock Cliff Monastery was destroyed in the 1970s during the Cultural Revolution. Today, 8 monks once again live here. One of them is Dao Tong, 60 years old. Stairs and walkways hewn into the rock lead up to the temple grottos. The Horseshoe Monastery was founded 1700 years ago, at the time of the Jin dynasty, Bradley hears. Luckily, Mao Zedong's Red Guards only partially destroyed it.
I mean, all religious temples in China have suffered since the 1950s. This place was partially destroyed in the Cultural Revolution. This was a time when Chairman Mao decided that all the four olds should be swept away. That you had to create a new society. You had to destroy what was traditional and what was Chinese. So a lot of the buildings were destroyed. The caves are still intact, but a lot of all the Buddhist icons would have been smashed, as they were throughout China, throughout Tibet. It was a very sad time for Chinese history.
These days, the Chinese are turning to religion once again, although in a pragmatic way. Mr. and Mrs. Lee pray for success in work and a good income for their newborn babies.
Buddhism for Chinese people is mostly about securing material wealth. You'd come to a monastery to pray for a child, and if a child, then a son. You'd pray for a new car, for happiness, for wealth, for that promotion. I think a lot of people, especially older people, have had difficulties coming to terms with this new Chinese society, the new kind of capitalist way of looking at things, and life's become quite hectic and quite difficult, and they don't quite understand it. So, I think a Buddhist temple like this offers a little escape, or a way to get some spiritual guidance, which perhaps is lacking in mainstream Chinese society. "30 years of atheism, it takes its toll on the spiritual life of a nation, I think. I think for the youth, probably capitalism is the main religion, but as you get older, it's nice to see. It's nice to see this happen.
Where once the Polos passed by on camels, today there is a train. Miss Lee, the train conductress, provides some entertainment.
This is the new China. The lady who works for the railways selling us toys as she walks through the aisles, trying to make a little bit of cash. Welcome to communism with Chinese characteristics. Right now the train is going through the Heshi corridor of Gansu province. It's got 2 parallel mountain ranges going on either side, so it acts as a funnel for all the Silk Road trade coming from Central Asia into China. And this goes all the way down to Lanzhou. That's up next.
By the time they had passed this city on the banks of the Yellow River, the Venetians had put the vast deserts of China behind them. They had reached the heartland of China.
Now this is Lanzhou. This is the first really big Chinese city I've seen on this trip, and pretty much the biggest city all the way since Tehran. About 4 or 5 million people. As you can see, the air quality is not great, but it's a lot better now than it was a few years back, and it was one of the world's top 10 most polluted cities. And this is where the Hershey Corridor meets the Yellow River. You can see here, it's where the Silk Road hits the Yellow River.
It may not yet have reached the villages, but provincial cities like Lanzhou are now completely shaped by the new Western consumerist lifestyle. Bradley has to search long and hard before he spots one of the old-fashioned backstreet markets that were once everywhere in China.
There's been so much kind of rebuilding and demolishing of old neighborhoods like this, and they're kind of an endangered species now. The main streets all look the same in every Chinese city. It's all big, flashy food courts. So these kind of backstreet markets have a real neighborhood community feel, you know. 小姐，挺好吃，谢谢你，挺好吃。
In the northern parts of China, the staple food is noodles made from wheat flour. People eat them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
One of the great myths of Marco Polo is that Marco Polo brought noodles back to Italy with him, you know, but I wouldn't tell an Italian that his noodles came from China, and I wouldn't tell a Chinese person that his noodles came from Italy. So I think it's just another one of the myths surrounding Marco Polo.
Historians have studied Marco Polo's descriptions of China in great detail, and they have noticed some odd discrepancies. He didn't mention the Great Wall of China, nor chopsticks, nor does he write about porcelain, which at the time was produced solely in China. However, jade, China's most important precious stone, Marco does describe at length.
Jade's still fetching a high price 800 years later.
Marco doesn't say a word about tea, the national drink of China. But he does report admiringly on paper money, which came into use in Europe only 400 years later.
He was really impressed by Kublai Khan's paper money. It was still quite a rarity to him. He couldn't believe you could just print money.
The Venetian even mentions that if you print too much of it, its value goes down.
The Chinese characters was one of many things in China that Marco Polo didn't bother to mention. 怎么样？还可以吗？就是漂亮，就不好看。也好看。谢谢你。Looks like it's going to be a long trip. The road to the Mongol heartland is never an easy one.
The bus to Inner Mongolia leaves bang on time. Each day, over 1 million such long-distance coaches ply the roads of China.
The Chinese bus system is mind-bogglingly huge and works really well. Millions of people using it every day. It's the easiest way to get around this part of China.
From Lanzhou, it's about 1,500 kilometers to Chengdu, where Marco Polo finally met the Emperor of China, Kublai Khan, for the first time. Many means of transport later comes a different landscape. Grassland, sparsely inhabited, Inner Mongolia. Not very far from here lies Chengdu, where the summer palace of Kublai Khan once stood.
This guy's the reason Marco Polo came to China. That's also the reason why I've come here. Everybody here knows this guy, great Kublai Khan.
A friend has told Bradley about a man who everybody calls Batir, meaning hero. They want to meet at the ruins of the Summer Palace. The inner and outer walls of the huge area are easy to make out on a satellite map. It was in 1275 that Marco Polo finally arrived here, 3.5 years after his departure from Venice. His reports on Kublai Khan's summer palace fill several chapters of his book, a paean of praise on the power and grandeur of the great Khan, who in the 13th century ruled over the world's largest empire. Today, only parts of the city walls remain. Marco Polo enthuses about Chengdu, the mythical Xanadu, which was partly a town and partly a tent camp.
6公里还有6公里，6公里，就是可能是外面的城市。说库布莱汗要是他要喝酒，那个杯子没有人给他，那个杯子自己来，不用人。He talks about a big marble palace, a little kind of yurt-shaped pagoda made of lacquered bamboo. Talks of 10,000 white horses outside and great hunting expeditions. It's really quite a royal, very luxurious kind of summer camp for Kublai Khan. Marco Polo really gets into the, really creates a great feeling of what this place must have looked like 800 years ago.
아주하게 은데서 소외로 적었어. 아다 임 갔다. 그걸로 만에 제가 하네 어린 부여랑 아나 들기 차가지. 어린 부여랑 운스니간 소외 아나 아주하게 부디 지르를 해줬어. 임가 망고 쫓긴 그다도 그저도 하나씩 임이 제가
At the times of Marco Polo, they were the rulers of China. Today, the approximately 6 million Mongols in China are a minority that lives on the fringes of society. That Inner Mongolia is a so-called autonomous region doesn't change the fact that Beijing clearly calls the shots. In the region around Chengdu, people still live the old Mongolian way of life. The song, composed by Batir himself, praises the great bygone days when Kublai Khan founded the Yuan dynasty. Today, Han Chinese wrinkle their noses when thinking of the times when barbarian horsemen ruled the Middle Kingdom.
Like most of the nationalities in China, the Mongolians, they're very much tied to the Chinese system. So the young Mongolian kids are learning Chinese in school, and you have to speak Chinese to get by in modern-day China.
For some reason, the mighty Kublai Khan took a shine to the three travelers from Venice. Young Marco in particular gained the trust of the Emperor of China. For 17 years, Marco Polo enjoyed his protection and privileges, even joining the imperial administration for a time. Just as Marco Polo was enjoying the festivities in Chengdu, the Khan was putting the final touches to his new capital, 7 days' ride away. And when the Emperor of China and his entourage moved to Kanbalik, today Beijing, Marco Polo was with them.
honey, it's me. Yeah, how are you? Good. Yeah, I'm in Beijing. You know, I was supposed to come home next Tuesday. Well, I've had to kind of extend it by a couple of weeks, if that's all right. Yeah, I know. Maybe John can help you with that. Maybe John can help you with that.
Bradley Mayhew, an Englishman, is married in the United States. It's been a long time since he enjoyed some Western music, and there's plenty of it in Beijing. In this mega-city of 16 million people, not much is left from the era of Marco Polo and Kublai Khan, at least at first glance. But the main traffic axes of Beijing still run exactly where the Mongols once laid them out.
Marco Polo writes that Kambalik streets were so straight and wide that you could see from one end to the other, from one gate to the next. Looks like Beijing's communist city planners like the same kind of system as the Mongols.
And also the drum tower stands exactly where it stood in Marco Polo's times. The 24 drums sounded the hour to the city's inhabitants. They also announced the opening and the closing of the city gates. Close by the drum tower lay the center of power of the vast empire, the palace of the Mongol emperor. Marco Polo described the palace vividly. What remains today dates largely from the Ming dynasty, which defeated and succeeded the Mongols.
When the Ming dynasty came to power in about the 14th century, they smashed and kind of swept aside everything that belonged to the Yuan dynasty. But what Marco Polo describes is very, very similar to what we see today. We see the walls, the palace, the corner gates he describes. So the layout of this city is very, very similar to Kublai Khan's original palace.
After an epic journey, Marco Polo had finally reached his destination. He had arrived at the very heart of the Middle Kingdom. Today, the Emperor's Palace, the so-called Forbidden City, is China's #1 tourist attraction. Up to 50,000, mostly Chinese, visit every day.
The Mongols didn't really know much about building cities, they knew more about destroying them, so they used Chinese architects, Chinese architecture. So although the actual buildings are not these ones, they must have looked something like this. It must have really dazzled young Marco Polo.
The Palace of Heavenly Purity was where the Emperor made his decisions.
This is the heart of the imperial city where the Emperor gave his audiences. Surrounding here was the imperial city, forbidden to everyone except from the Emperor's court. Outside here was Beijing city, so this was really the very heart of the Chinese Empire. All roads led to this very nerve center.
It's quite amazing that the Emperor actually found time for Marco Polo. Tiananmen, the gate of heavenly peace. Thousands take their pictures in front of this Beijing landmark, where in 1989, China's democratic movement was brutally crushed.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Bye-bye. So this is Tiananmen Gate. This is where Chairman Mao stood right up there on the balcony, proclaimed that the Chinese people had stood up and proclaimed the People's Republic of China. This is also Chang'an Street. This is where the very edge of the Yuan dynasty walls were. So this marked the very edge of Kublai Khan's imperial city, from one great imperial power to the next. Wan Shui Mao Zhuxi, 10,000 years to Chairman Mao.
A tugboat and 11 barges, each loaded with 1,000 tons of coal, headed for the booming industries of eastern China, explains Captain Meng. After his arrival in Beijing, Marco Polo did not return to Europe immediately. He stayed in China for 17 years, crisscrossing the huge country in numerous voyages, supposedly as an envoy of the Great Khan. Is this really possible?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that Marco Polo was in the employ of the Great Khan. The Khan used a lot of foreign advisors because he was surrounded by the sea of Chinese. He didn't really just trust them very much. So certainly as a tax collector or an official, it's very likely. But the problem is there's no records in the Chinese annals. 你听不懂我说？我说那个马可波罗他来不来中国，我们不太清楚他真的来这里还是他写了。听不懂。
Captain Meng's interest lies in transporting coal. Marco Polo is not really his cup of tea.
There's a lot of things that Marco Polo doesn't mention. That's the main trouble, but a lot of people don't believe he actually came here. For example, tea. How could you not write about Chinese tea or porcelain, the chopsticks, Chinese characters, acupuncture, foot binding? I mean, some of these things can be kind of explained away. He was mostly surrounded by the Mongol court. He didn't have that much access to the Chinese world, so he wouldn't necessarily have seen, for example, foot binding. He wouldn't have been that close to Chinese families to have seen that. But there are certainly some curiosities as to why he left these things out.
The Grand Canal of China, 1,800 kilometers long. The world's oldest and longest man-made waterway still connects the capital Beijing with the city of Hangzhou in the east of China. Mainly coal and coke are transported.
我可以试试唱吗？
你可以，
可以吗？
来，请。
我现在我是老板。
老板不在这里，老板都是在家里。
是司机。
对对对，你是司机。
司机。
你就是司机。
外国司机。
司机。按一下。对对对。
That's more like it. Get out the way.
In the province of Shandong, the coal convoys cross a large lake. Here, people are still fishing the old Chinese way, with trained cormorants. Marco Polo must have seen this unusual fishing technique. The necks of the birds are loosely tied, so that they can't swallow larger fish. The Venetian generally has an eye for the strange or unusual, but about cormorants, he says nothing. Rice, salt, ceramics, and the luxurious silk were shipped to Beijing on the Grand Canal and its side waterways. Numerous cities sprang up along the canal, densely populated and highly developed, shaped by trade, crafts, and an emerging middle class, far ahead of the medieval cities of Europe.
The Chinese cities on the southern part of the Grand Canal were really rich, booming centers of trade, lots of silk production going on, and huge populations. I think Marco Polo would have been really impressed by that, especially coming from the more nomadic societies of Central Asia. This would have really been a big eye-opener for him.
Countless spinning and weaving workshops can still be found in Zhejiang province, to this day China's main silk-producing region.
This region's been a stronghold of silk production for centuries, including during Marco Polo's time. Would have been millions of farmers all raising silkworms, and it's still going strong. Feels very smooth and very soft, just like you'd expect it to. For me, it feels like I've been following this story of silk all the way from Venice. This is pretty much the source. In a way, it feels like, you know, right here. This is where the Silk Road starts. 再做一次可以吗？
哦，可以的。
The Grand Canal of China terminates in Marco Polo's favorite city.
He wrote about the bridges so tall that entire fleets could pass through them. Yeah, this was a very good time for Marco Polo's visit. The Kublai Khan had just taken the city and most of the country, but the cultural sophistication of the Sung dynasty was still there. The city was pretty much left intact. This really was one of the great, cities of China at the time, probably the biggest city in the world, and a very sophisticated, refined place. For the city is beyond dispute the finest and the noblest in the world. Marco Polo definitely thought this was the most incredible city he'd visited on the whole of his travels. Even today, to most Chinese, Hangzhou is synonymous with how a city should be, how scenery should be. It's this perfect Chinese mix of beautiful natural scenery, the water and the mountains, mixed with the man-made touches that just make it that bit more refined and sophisticated. It's a huge tourist destination for the Chinese. Everyone wants to come to Hangzhou at least once.
Hangzhou, the Venice of the East, is viewed as a magical, romantic place in China. Marco Polo writes of the angelic women, 12,000 stone bridges, 3,000 heated public baths, the pepper market, and the city's perfect administration.
It says inside the city there is a lake which has a compass of some 30 miles. And all around it are erected beautiful palaces and mansions of the richest and most exquisite structure that you can imagine, belonging to the nobles of the city.
Marco Polo describes the splendid pleasure boats with their courtly parties as if he were in Hangzhou only yesterday.
It's amazing how little has changed in 800 years almost. His journey wasn't necessarily unique, but the book that he wrote, the information that he put down for subsequent generations, that really changed, the course of exploration and geography. And it had so much information that it took, hundreds of years for Europe to kind of gradually take it all in and accept that was the face of Asia that they didn't know about.
The three Venetian travelers stayed in China for 17 years. Not really by choice. Conflicts between the Mongolian conquerors had erupted along the length of the Silk Road. Although the Venetians had got accustomed to life in China, the traveling, the food, the tea ceremonies, they must have become homesick over the years. Marco Polo was tired. He was now 37 years old. It was time to go home.
there's always a mixture of emotions when you come to the end of a trip. You know, I'm glad to be heading home, but there's always a certain sadness that the trip's ending and all this input is coming to a close. But it'll be certainly be very nice to see my wife, and very nice to wear a different shirt as well. It's probably the best.
In the year 1291, a chance to travel back home appeared suddenly and unexpectedly. Kublai was sending a princess to Persia, where she was to marry a second cousin of his. The Polos were allowed to accompany her on her ship. It took them another 3 years to reach their hometown. A quarter of a century had passed since their departure.
When the three Polos arrived back home, they probably came in big, long Mongol cloaks, big furry hats, big shaggy beards, and honestly, no one recognized them. It was only later, when they stripped open their old raggedy cloaks and all these jewels and rubies and diamonds fell out, that they were really taken seriously.
For Bradley, it's time to start working on the write-up of his journey. For one last time to the Corte del Milione, where Marco Polo once lived. Even though questions remain, Marco Polo's journey, together with his book, turned him into a legend. A myth that lives on to this day.
Having traveled along much of the route that Marco traveled, I find it hard to believe that he didn't go to China, despite all the errors, all the omissions, all the exaggerations, the fact that no one believed him when he got home. When you take the book and you're there in the place, it matches up, it fits, and it seems to me that he must have made this trip. Maybe not quite the way he describes it, maybe not quite in the route that people allege that he made, but I think it's beyond dispute, absolutely. It's been amazing to follow in his footsteps. It's been a hard trip, it's been a long trip. You know, Marco Polo took 27 years, didn't quite take us that long, but it's been amazing. It's been an epic journey all the way across the breadth of Asia. And yeah, it's amazing extremes, sometimes burning in the desert, sometimes freezing on the top of a mountain pass. But yeah, it's one of the ultimate overland trips you can make.